when Shaquille O'Neal walked into the Meridian Grand on Peachtree Street in Atlanta on the morning of March 14th. He was wearing a gray hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of all-white Nike Air Force Ones that had seen better days. No entourage, no security, no jewelry of any kind. He had a paper coffee cup in one hand and his phone face down in the other, and he walked through the glass, revolving door like a man who had been inside 1,000 buildings and needed nothing from this one. He was inside for 11 minutes. 4 championships, 28,000 career points, a net worth that Forbes most recently placed above $400 million. One of the most recognizable faces on the planet for 30 years running. None of that was visible when Marcus Webb, 43 years old, 16 years on the job, built like a man who had been told his whole life that his size was the only currency he had, stepped in front of him near the elevator bank and said, "Sir, this building is for tenants and authorized guests only. I'm going to need you to come with me." Shaq looked at him. Didn't say a word. Went with him. They walked him to the lobby entrance. Marcus Webb held the door. Shaq stepped through it onto Peachtree Street with his coffee cup still in his hand, turned left, and kept walking. And said absolutely nothing. But before Marcus Webb opened that door, something had already caught Shaq's attention. 3 things, actually. The first was the directory board near the elevator. A long panel of black felt with white push in letters listing every tenant by floor. The board was clean and current except for one thing. The name on the 14th floor had been removed. The little white letters were just gone. The space where a business name should have been sat blank and slightly lighter than the felt around it. The way a wall looks when a picture is hung on it for years and then been taken down. Shaq looked at it, kept moving. The second was a woman behind the security desk, 50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a small laminated photo taped to the inside edge of her computer monitor, where most people put their kids or their dogs. He couldn't see who was in the photo from where he was standing. He noticed the photo. He noticed the way her eyes moved to Marcus Webb's back for just a second when Marcus stepped away from his station. The way her jaw shifted slightly. The way a person's jaw shifts when they are about to say something and then decide not to. She said nothing. The third was a cardboard moving box sitting on the floor beside the freight elevator, half sealed with tape, the flaps folded back. Inside it, visible from 10 feet away, a framed certificate of some kind, face down on top of a stack of folded shirts. And underneath the shirts, the corner of something. A wooden plaque. Shaq noticed all 3. Filed them. Said nothing, kept moving toward the elevator. And then Marcus Webb was in front of him. Now here is the part that nobody in that lobby understood yet. What Marcus Webb had absolutely no idea about. What the woman behind the desk did not know. What the building manager 2 floors up did not know. What the 17 people who worked in this building's 4 occupied offices would not know until 48 hours later, was a single fact. Shaq had owned this building for 6 days. The closing documents had been signed the previous Tuesday in a conference room in Buckhead. The ink had been on paper for 144 hours. The former owner, a commercial real estate group based in Charlotte, had received a wire transfer. Shaq's people had taken possession of the keys. He had not told anyone on the building's staff. He had come that morning to walk the floors himself, the way his grandmother had taught him to walk into anything important for the first time. Quietly, without announcement, so you could see it the way it actually was. He had been carrying that ownership for 6 days. He had been carrying what he planned to do with it for something closer to 3 years. Stay with us for the whole video. Because the reason he bought this particular building, on this particular street, in this particular city is going to change the way you understand everything that happened in that lobby. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, the son of Lucille O'Neal and Philip Harrison, and from the very beginning, the world treated his size as an announcement he had not asked to make. He was large before he knew what large meant. He was 6 feet tall at 13. He knocked things over. He bumped into door frames. He took up more space in a room than the room had agreed to give him, and for years, more years than most people know, that made him feel like he was always apologizing for existing. It was his grandmother who stopped that. Odessa O'Neal. Everyone called her Big Mama. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall, made out of something that did not have a name yet, and she had a way of delivering the truth that left no room for rebuttal. She lived in a narrow row house in Newark, with a kitchen that smelled like cornbread and pine sol, and something else underneath that, something warm and permanent that Shaq later understood was the smell of a woman who had never stopped working. She pressed his face between her hands when he was 14 years old, after a kid at school had told him he moved like a building that was trying to be a person. And she said, "A man who knows his worth never has to announce it. You remember that. The room will figure it out." She said it so many times over the following years that it stopped being a sentence and became something else. It became weather. It became the thing he walked into every room carrying, even when he forgot he was carrying it. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, was a different kind of teacher. Strict and loving in a ratio that shifted depending on the week. Former Army, raised in a household where silence meant safety and discipline meant survival. Philip Harrison believed in Shaq the way a man believes in infrastructure. Quietly. Practically. Without ceremony. Because it simply had to be there. When Shaq was 15 and wanted to quit the school basketball team because the coach had benched him for 2 games, Philip Harrison sat across from him at the kitchen table and said 4 words. "Don't be a reaction." Then he got up and went back to his newspaper. Shaq figured out the rest of the sentence on his own. He rose the way people rise when the foundation is solid and the chip on the shoulder is exactly the right size, fast and undeniable. LSU, the 1992 NBA Draft, first overall pick. Rookie of the Year. Championships in Los Angeles, championships in Miami. $53 million in his first contract alone. A body of work that ended in Springfield, Massachusetts, in the Basketball Hall of Fame, with a speech that referenced his grandmother twice and his stepfather once, in exactly the order you would expect. Big Mama did not live to see the Hall of Fame induction. She died in 2013, on a Tuesday morning, in the same Newark row house where she had pressed Shaq's face between her hands and given him the sentence that would run through his life like a river runs through a city. Always there, always moving, shaping everything it touched. He still cannot drive past a building with a kitchen inside it that smells like cornbread without pulling over. Marcus Webb had grown up 40 miles south of Atlanta, in a town called Griffin, Georgia, where his mother worked the early shift at a textile mill and his father repaired air conditioning units, until a fall from a ladder in 2004 ended that. Marcus was 19 when the fall happened. He had been 3 semesters into a criminal justice degree at Georgia Perimeter College. And he had a plan, a reasonable, careful, earnest plan that involved graduating, applying to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, and building something in this city that his parents could point to with the specific pride that comes from pointing at the thing a person built from scratch. The fall put his father in inpatient rehabilitation for 7 months. The bills arrived the way bills arrive, all at once, without warning, each one slightly more than the last. Marcus withdrew from Georgia Perimeter. He got a security certification. He got a job. He was good at the job. He was thorough, and he was fair. And in 16 years, he had received 11 commendations and 2 formal complaints. The complaints were both from the same year, 2019, a hard year. The year his mother was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's and his wife left, and the math he did every night before bed stopped adding up, no matter how many times he ran it. Both complaints were for what the incident reports called aggressive tone during a removal procedure. He did not dispute them. He signed the paperwork. He kept working. On the morning of March 14th, Marcus Webb had been at his post since 6 a.m. He had not slept well. His mother had called at 2 a.m. with a question she had already asked him 3 times that week, and he had answered it 3 times the way he always answered it, gently, patiently, without a trace of the exhaustion that had been sitting behind his eyes for 18 months. He had made coffee at home, burned the first pot, drank the second pot too fast. The building manager, a man named Terrence Gill, who worked from the 14th floor and was currently, though Marcus did not know this, in the middle of his 3rd week on a performance improvement plan, had sent Marcus a text at 7:47 a.m. that read, "Unauthorized individuals may attempt access today. Do not let anyone up to 14 without credentials. No exceptions." Building protocol. Marcus Webb read the text. He took it seriously the way he took everything seriously. When a very large man in a gray hoodie walked in at 9:11 a.m. and moved toward the elevator without stopping at the desk, Marcus Webb did his job. He said it before he fully registered the face. By the time the name arrived in his brain, by the time something behind his eyes shifted and said wait, the words were already in the air and could not be taken back. "Sir, this building is for tenants and authorized guests only." He had been 1 second from his whole life changing direction. He did not know that yet. The woman behind the security desk was named Claudette Simmons. She was 54 years old, had worked this building for 9 years, and was, by any reasonable measure, the most competent person on the premises. She knew every tenant by first name. She remembered birthdays. She had once, on a Wednesday afternoon in February, talked a man out of a panic attack in the lobby by simply handing him a cup of water and telling him, with absolute authority, that this day was going to end and the next one was going to be different. She was that kind of person. She had recognized Shaq the moment he came through the revolving door. She had been 3 inches from her phone and had decided, in the space of about a second and a half, not to pick it up. Marcus was already moving. Claudette was trying to calculate whether she was about to watch something become a problem, and she was too slow, and the door had already opened and closed, and Shaq was already on the sidewalk. She picked up her radio. Down the hall behind a door marked maintenance, B2. A 22-year-old named Darius Okafor was on his 2nd week on the job, buffing the floor in a rhythm he had invented himself, earbuds in, thinking about the electrical engineering exam he had the following morning. He was the first person in his family to attend Georgia Tech. He worked this building 3 mornings a week to cover the gap between his scholarship and his rent. He was not involved in what happened in the lobby. He was not a witness to it. He did not find out about it until later, and the way he found out would be the thing that changed his life. Though he did not know that yet either. On the 4th floor, in a suite occupied by a nonprofit called Second Gear Atlanta, a workforce training organization for formerly incarcerated adults, a woman named Beverly Okafor was finishing her morning prep before her 9:30 class. She was 61 years old. She was Darius's grandmother. She had started Second Gear Atlanta with $400 and a folding table in a church fellowship hall 11 years ago. She did not know her grandson worked in this building. She did not know yet that the building had a new owner. She was making coffee in the break room, thinking about her 9:30 students, when she heard the front door of the suite open and then close in the specific way a door closes when the person closing it has chosen to close it quietly. She did not think much of it. The sidewalk outside the Meridian Grand on Peachtree Street runs straight and wide and catches the morning light at an angle that makes everything look more official than it is. Shaq stood on it with his coffee cup. He did not look angry. People who knew him well would have said he looked precisely the way he looked on the free throw line in the final minute of a close game, still contained running calculations behind an expression that gave nothing away. He took out his phone. He made a call. The call lasted 45 seconds. Inside the building, Claudette's radio crackled. Then, her desk phone rang. She picked it up, listened, said yes sir 4 times, hung up, and sat very still for a moment, with both hands flat on the desk in front of her. The way a person sits when they are rapidly reclassifying everything they thought they understood about the last 10 minutes. She looked at Marcus. Marcus was back at his station. His shoulders were set the way they get set when a man knows he did exactly what he was supposed to do and is waiting for the world to confirm it. "Marcus," Claudette said. "Come here." A teenager who had been sitting in the lobby waiting for his mother to come down from a dentist's office on the 3rd floor had already figured it out. He was 15. He had a phone, and he had been watching from the moment the big man walked in. He had not said anything. He was the kind of kid who watched first and said things later, which is either the makings of wisdom or the makings of patience, depending on who you ask. His name was Antoine. He watched Claudette pick up the phone. He watched her expression change. He looked back down at his phone. "But you are going to have to wait just a little longer, because before you hear what Shaq said when he walked back through that revolving door, you need to understand one more thing. The thing that explains not just why he bought this building, but why he had been walking toward this specific morning for 3 full years. Nobody in that lobby was prepared for it. Not Marcus. Not Claudette. Not the teenager with the phone. Not the man on the 14th floor who had sent the 747 text and was about to find out exactly what the consequences of that text were going to be. The room held very still. Outside, on Peachtree Street, the revolving door began to move. He came back in differently. It is hard to explain what changes when a person decides to stop being invisible, but everyone in that lobby felt it. The hoodie was the same hoodie. The shoes were the same shoes. Shaq was the same Shaq who had walked out 11 minutes ago. But something in the way he occupied the space had shifted, quietly, completely. The way a cloud moves off the sun and the temperature of an entire yard changes in under a second. He walked to the security desk. He set his coffee cup down on the counter with a small, precise sound. He reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and removed a single piece of folded paper. He unfolded it and placed it flat on the desk in front of Claudette Simmons without saying a word. It was a cover sheet from a property transfer document. At the top, in clean legal type, Meridian Grand Commercial Tower, 1140 Peachtree Street NE, Atlanta, Georgia. Below that, a line, transferee. Below that, a name. Claudette read the name. Something moved in her face that was not quite shock and not quite recognition, but lived uncomfortably close to both. She looked up at him. He was looking at Marcus Webb. Marcus was reading the paper from where he stood, his neck extended slightly, the way a person reads something they do not yet fully believe. The color left his face in a slow, even way. "Sir," he said, and stopped. Started again. "Mr. O'Neill." Stopped, Shaq said. "What's your name?" Marcus Webb." Shaq nodded. Once, slowly. "Marcus, how long have you been in this building?" 16 years. Shaq nodded again. He picked up the paper. He put it back in his pocket. He turned to Claudette. "I need to see Terrence Gill. Tell him I'm coming up." Then he looked back at Marcus Webb for a moment. One long, even look that Marcus would spend a long time thinking about afterward. And he said, "You did your job. That's what I needed to see." He got in the elevator. Here is what nobody in that lobby knew. Here is the thing that the last 11 minutes had been building toward. And the reason this story is not what it looked like from the outside. 3 years earlier, Shaq had been in Atlanta for a speaking engagement. He had taken a wrong turn on foot. This is documented. He talks about it in an interview, and ended up on a block he did not recognize. And he had walked into a small workforce training center to ask for directions, because his phone was dead. The man behind the desk of that training center was named Harold Webb. Harold Webb was 68 years old. He was the founder and director of a workforce program he had been running for 11 years out of a church fellowship hall and, later, from a donated suite on the 4th floor of the Meridian Grand on Peachtree Street. He had a kind, careful face and a handshake that meant something, and when a 6'9" man in a gray hoodie came through his door looking for directions, he did not treat it like anything other than exactly what it was: a man who needed help. He gave Shaq directions. He offered him a phone charger. He told him, with genuine brevity, what Second Gear Atlanta did and who it served. Shaq listened. He charged his phone. He thanked Harold and left. He looked up the organization that night from his hotel room. Second Gear Atlanta had a 94% job placement rate among its graduates. It operated on grants, donations, and an annual fundraiser that covered roughly 60% of its budget. Its lease on the 4th floor of the Meridian Grand was month to month and had been for 2 years. The building's former owners had been trying to convert commercial space to retail, and Second Gear was an obstacle to that plan. Harold Webb had received informal notice 6 months earlier that their space would not be renewed. Shaq made 2 calls. The first was to his business team. The second was to his accountant. The property came available 14 months later. The deal closed the previous Tuesday. The plan Shaq had been carrying for 3 years was this: Second Gear Atlanta was not leaving. Second Gear Atlanta was going to the 4th floor permanently, at a rent fixed for 25 years, with a capital budget for renovation attached to the lease. Harold Webb was Marcus Webb's father. The man who had sent the 747 text, Terrence Gill, the building manager on the 14th floor, was the man who had been managing the pressure campaign against Second Gear on behalf of the former ownership. The moving box by the freight elevator. The blank space on the directory. The certificate face down in the box. He had already begun packing before he knew who the new owner was. Shaq rode the elevator to the 14th floor. He did not stay long. The conversation between Shaq and Terrence Gill lasted 9 minutes. No one recorded it. 2 people on the 14th floor, a paralegal named Simone and a man named David who ran the copy machine, heard most of it through the wall, and they both said later that it was the quietest conversation they had ever heard that they also could not stop listening to. There was no shouting. There was no performance. Shaq said what needed to be said in the register of a man who had nothing left to prove, and Terrence Gill said very little. And when the door opened and Shaq walked back to the elevator, Terrence Gill stood in his office with his hands at his sides and his moving box on his desk, and understood that he had been on the wrong side of something for longer than he wanted to count. He resigned that afternoon. He submitted his paperwork by email, 2 paragraphs, no drama. Shaq rode back down to the lobby. He walked to the security desk where Claudette Simmons and Marcus Webb were both standing, the way people stand when they are waiting to find out what kind of day they are actually having. He reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a business card. Plain, white, his foundation's logo in one corner, a number written in pen on the back. He held it out to Marcus Webb. "Your father built something real up on 4, he said. "A man who does that raises a son a certain kind of way. I saw it this morning." He set the card on the counter. "That number goes to my director of building operations. I need somebody in this building I can trust. Call by Friday." Marcus Webb looked at the card. Then he looked up. Shaq had already turned back to the elevator. He pressed the button for the 4th floor. Beverly Okafor was still in the second-gear break room when she heard the door of the suite open again, and this time the footsteps were heavier, slower, purposeful in the way footsteps are purposeful when a person is looking at every wall of a space they are seeing for the first time with new eyes. She came out of the break room. She stopped in the doorway. 6'9", gray hoodie, coffee cup. Shaq looked around the suite for a moment. He looked at the folding tables, the whiteboard covered in interview prep notes, the row of donated blazers on a rack by the window in 3 sizes. He looked at the photograph on the wall, Harold Webb cutting a ribbon with a pair of orange-handled scissors, a room full of people behind him, everyone smiling the specific way people smile when something has actually happened that was supposed to happen. He looked at Beverly Okafor. "You Harold's partner?" he said. "His sister," she said. He nodded. He looked at the room again. "This stays," he said. "It stays and it grows. Tell him I'll be back Thursday." He was almost to the door when Beverly Okafor said the thing she had been deciding whether to say from the moment she recognized him. She said it quickly, before she could stop herself. "Mr. O'Neill, my grandson works in this building. Maintenance, he's at Georgia Tech. Electrical engineering." Shaq stopped. He turned. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. "What's his name?" Shaq said. "Darius," she said. "Darius Okafor." Shaq pulled out his phone. He typed the name into it. He looked up at Beverly Okafor. "Tell Darius," he said, "that a man who keeps working when nobody's watching already knows something most people spend their whole life trying to learn." He left. Beverly Okafor stood in the doorway of the suite for a long moment, completely still, her hand over her mouth. On that morning in Atlanta, a security guard named Marcus Webb learned that doing your job with integrity is never wasted, because the person watching you do it might be the only person who can change your life. A building manager named Terrence Gill learned that the systems we use to push people out of their spaces have authors, and authors are accountable. A woman named Claudette Simmons, 9 years behind that desk, always the most competent person in the room, learned that sometimes the morning you think is ordinary is the morning everything finally gets confirmed. A 22-year-old named Darius Okafor, buffing a floor in the basement, carrying his family and his future in one body, learned something he would not hear until his grandmother called him at noon that day, and when she told him what the new owner had said, he sat down in the hallway outside the maintenance room, put his back against the wall, and did not get up for 4 full minutes. And somewhere on the 4th floor of a building on Peachtree Street, a workforce training program that had been one missed lease renewal away from closing its doors, learned that the room had figured it out. Big Mama was right. She always was. A man who knows his worth never has to announce it. He never did. And neither should you. Drop a comment right now and tell us, where are you watching from, and who in your life gave you the sentence you still carry? We want to know. If this story hit you the way it hit us, This video has earned that like. You know it has. Hit it. This channel is for people who believe that how you carry yourself in the rooms that don't know your name says everything about who you really are. And if that's you, subscribe, because that is what we build here, every single week. And when you are ready for the next one, stay right there. We will see you there.